Swarmer is a tower with probably the most unfortunate fate in all of TDS. It used to be a broken tower in a good sense, being able to deal some insane DPS on bosses. Swarmer was the one responsible for crazy achievements such as Duo Night 3 of Solar Eclipse or Solo Frost Invasion. Little did the players know, he was not supposed to be that strong. And a single change later, Swarmer was left rotting in F tier up until this day. But what was the cause of developers killing Swarmer's insane DPS potential? And was that potential just a bug? Today, we will dive into history of Swarmer, the tower that got ruined by a bug fix. Swarmer was firstly released April 6, 2020, as part of the TDS Egg Hunt event. During this period, the Roblox had Egg Hunt 2020 going on, which was sadly the last egg hunt we ever got. This egg hunt was dev hunt, meaning that the rewards, in this case eggs, were located in many different games across Roblox. Tower Defense Simulator was one of the games participated. To get egg here, you had to beat the Spring 2020 event on easy mode. That's correct, this was the first event to practice easy and hard mode system. Swarmer was the reward for beating hard mode of the event. At first glance, Swarmer looked mediocre. He was an okay early game tower, but his DPS was not good, meaning he struggled against bosses and later waves. His main gimmick was to shoot bees at enemies that make them go crazy while also chipping away their health. So basically, it worked like poison damage in other games. Another thing about Swarmer also was that he would attack only enemies that are not stinged yet. If all enemies inside Swarmer's range are stinged, he would not attack anything. At least that's what developers intended Swarmer to do. But something went horribly wrong. Swarmer also had no hidden detection, meaning you could not rely on it fully further in game and had to use other towers like Minigunner. Also, fun fact, Swarmer now looks exact same as he looked back in 2020 minus skin color and face change. Swarmer also had a beehive ability, which throws a beehive which acts like a bomb, but instead of damaging enemies, makes them all sting. This did not look very strong at first, but later it would have a major impact in Swarmer's domination. Overhaul update changed most TDS towers, buffing, nerfing, and straight up killing some. And Swarmer got absolutely zero changes. Developers likely thought that Swarmer is too new to change because after all, he was only 6 months old at a time. His stats weren't that crazy either, so they decided not to touch him. What did change though are his upgrade descriptions. For some reason, all upgrades but level 3 did not list anything to do with stinging effect, despite that being his main gimmick. Overhaul update overall broke most of the game, so Swarmer's description breaking was not a priority to fix, especially considering Tower was pretty forgotten already. In fact, it took for whole years to fully fix it, which is pretty crazy, so Swarmer ended 2020 being below average event tower that not many people would use. But that would soon change. It is clear to me that developers do not care about Swarmer much. His base stats are underwhelming, and his model was not changed since 2020. Pretty much every old tower had at least some kind of rework at some point of their history. But Swarmer was an exception. Aside from pretty recently, Swarmer never had his stats directly changed, and bugs that Swarmer had took ages to fix, and even now, he is the most broken tower in all of TDS. It feels like Swarmer is supposed to be a joke tower like Paintballer, but Swarmer was about to prove that he was not a joke. 2021 was by far Swarmer's best year. Early in the year, a very interesting and off bug was discovered with Swarmer. Basically, Swarmer could attack the stinged enemy again if every other enemy was stinged as well or there were no other enemies. This was off because this allowed Swarmer to stack his 16 DPS sting multiple times on one enemy, turning it into hundreds of DPS. This also worked with beehive ability, meaning you could spam multiple beehives on same enemy using multiple Swarmers. This was beyond broken. No one could survive 30 plus Swarmers all stacking their stings and beehives at the enemy. This immediately turned Swarmer into a, or even S tier tower. The most famous Swarmer usage was a scripted Solo Frost Invasion video. Here, in early game Swarmer was actually used for crowd control and not boss slaughter. His beehive ability had large enough radius to cut a lot of enemies at once, killing all of them. Old Frost Invasion spammed a lot of enemies with compensation of them having less than usual event enemy HP. Beehive did not deal a lot of damage, but it had a massive area of effect. It was a match. On Final Wave, Swarmer's bug was used along with Accelerator and Ranger as other DPS to shred Frost Spirit before he reaches the base. Old Frost Invasion was supposed to be the hardest event yet, and the fact that you could solo it was just insulting, but the devs did not touch Swarmer yet. We are closing on 1,000 subscribers. Please consider subscribing to help me reach this amazing, gracious, mind-blowing, victorious, and stunning milestone. Thanks. Solar Eclipse was released December 4th, and Swarmer was used here for bosses as well. However, developers had enough this time. Swarmer's downfall was about to start. For days later after event's release, Swarmer got hit with a bug fix. From now on, Beehive could not stack. This severely reduced Swarmer's melting potential as Beehive contributed quite a lot to the Sting stacking process. However, Swarmer was still able to deal massive DPS even without Beehive's help. Swarmer was still used to Duo Triumph Night 3 of Solar Eclipse. So yeah, Swarmer was worse, but he still was in a tier tower and still was considered a massive boss killer. 2022 was not an eventful year for Swarmer. Nothing much happened to him besides some bugs that got fixed hours and days later. Swarmer continued to be a good boss killer. 2023 was the year where the mighty have fallen. First half of the year was the same as 2022, uneventful and boring. But something terrible happened when Lunar Overture was released. Lunar Overture itself is already a controversial event, but what happened to Swarmer during the event's release? Well, he got killed. The Sting stacking bug that made him OP has finally been fixed. Swarmer quickly fell off to F tier after this incident. He was only being used for bosses because his supposed purpose of being crowd controller was easily outclassed. As I already mentioned before, his base stats are mediocre at best, and he doesn't even have hidden detection. Swarmer went from hero to zero. 2024 was a terrible year for Swarmer. He was completely abandoned by not only developers, but by players as well. Many event towers received rework in 2024, but Swarmer was left out. The only thing he received is a small buff that did not move him out of F tier. In fact, Swarmer was actually worse than in previous years due to more early game towers being introduced as well as game modes becoming reworked and harder. And now we approach today, where Swarmer is at least no longer the worst tower in the game. This title was taken by Snowballer, who is literally worse than Mega Update Freezer. All we can do now is hope that he receives a rework, but before that, he will sit in our inventory and collect dust.